Social psychology. So, a question, you guys. We've learned about a number of different fields within psychology. So, what do you think social psychology is? So, think about that to yourselves for a second, and let's see if you're right. So, social psychology is psychology that studies the effects of social variables and cognitions on individual behavior and social interaction. So, social psychology looks at how people's thoughts, feelings, perceptions, motives, and behavior are influenced by other people. All right, so it tries to understand behavior within its social context. So, what is social context, right? Social context includes the real, imagined, or symbolic presence of other people. So, it's a lot of it has to do with perception. And that's why imagine is in there because it's people's perceptions of things. It might not be your reality, but it's their reality. So to continue on, it's the activities and interactions that take place among people, the settings in which behavior occurs, and the expectations and social norms governing behavior in a given setting. And so we see the little chart down here how social influences behavior, which then influences our personal influences, which then influences our social influences, and then you can go the other way with it as well. Those cycles we talked about how everything kind of influences each other. Here on the other diagram, you see you got the self right in the middle, and all the other things that influence you. Right, you got family that's close, school and work is also extremely important. It has a lot of socialization to you, and then obviously you have your friends and community, your culture, and obviously we have the world. And more, the world plays a bigger part in our social context because of social media and how we truly live in a global society now. So, major themes of social psychology, right? There are three major themes of social psychology that we're going to look at. Number one is the power of social situations. Number two is the subjective social reality, right? So, subjective means it's open to interpretation, and your social reality, like I mentioned earlier, that's your perception, which might not be everyone else's perception. And then thirdly, the promotion of human condition. So, if you've studied history or paid attention to history classes at all, you kind of see that we haven't always been the kindest. I mean, you can see that right now. But that is something we look at in social psychology is the promotion of human condition. How can we improve ourselves, right? How do we interact with each other for survival? Social pressure. Social pressure can create powerful psychological effects such as prejudice, discrimination, blind obedience, and violence. All things we'll talk more about later, but a lot of these you've heard of before, right? Prejudice, you prejudge someone. Discrimination is action. So prejudice is just thoughts, discrimination is actions. That's going to be key vocab later on. Blind obedience is where you just follow someone no matter what they tell you to do because they're your boss, they're an authoritarian figure. So that's something we look at, especially when you look at something like the Nazis, right? A lot of people ask, how could they do what they did, right? So we're going to look into things like that. You see blind obedience there, and obviously you see violence there as well. So social roles, rules, and how we are dressed, competition, or the mere presence of others can profoundly influence how we behave and think. I'm sure you guys have heard like dress to impress. That just by dressing nicely, it actually changes your mood and changes your presence and actually puts people in a better mood. That's why sometimes you'll see certain clubs maybe dress up on certain days. Um, Maybe athletics will dress up for a competition. So it really does have an effect on you. So we usually adapt our behavior to the demands of the social situation. And in ambiguous situations, we take our cues from the behavior of others in that setting. Right? So if it's not sure how you should act, you kind of look around and look at others and see how they're acting, and then you'll tend to act the same way, right? We call that conformity, which is another big vocab word for this unit. Situationism versus dispositionism. So situationism is a view that says environmental condition influences people's behavior as much or more than their personal disposition does. So if you remember that from the beginning of the year, the enduring issue we talked about, right? Like personality versus situation, which one has a bigger effect on you. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. So the situationism says the situation or your environmental conditions is going to influence your behavior more than your personality, your personal disposition, who you truly are. Where dispositionism is the opposite, right? That's a view that says internal factors such as genes, traits, character qualities influence your behavior more than the situation we are in. So they're saying no matter what the situation you're in, you're going to act who you truly are, right? So a lot of people say, those tough circumstances, that's when your true character comes out. And that's what dispositionism is saying. Your true character comes out in those situations. So regardless of your view, people's behavior depends heavily on two factors: the social roles they play and the social norms to the group. Right? So if you're in a situation, you might act very differently if you're the leader of that situation versus if you're not like a leader. So if you're like a teacher with in a classroom and you're in an emergency situation, there's a certain role you have to play and you're going to act a certain way. Where if you're just a bystander at like a similar type of emergency, you might act very differently and not take that leadership role. Social roles. One of several socially defined patterns of behavior that are expected of persons in a given setting or group. The roles people assume may be the result of a person's interests, abilities, and goals, or they may be imposed on a person by culture, economic, or biological conditions. So if you look at your social roles, we all have a ton of different social roles out there, and some define us more than others. I mean, it could be being a brother or sister, a son, a daughter, a parent, um, a teammate, right? So we all have these different social roles that help define our behavior. So the last slide, social norms, right? A group's expectations regarding what is appropriate and acceptable for its members' attitudes and behaviors in given situations. So that's just saying, a social norm in one culture might be completely different than a social norm in another culture. But it's just pretty much what's the normal way, the appropriate way to act and behave. So the cartoon says, society hates bullies, son, except for grown-up ones with money. For some reason, they're okay, right? So social norm when you're younger, it's not good to be mean to people, right? Bully them. But when you get older and like you're a corporation, well, that's just capitalism, or that's just whatever it might be. But they're just playing the game, playing by the rules, and it's okay. But essentially, they're just bullying smaller companies. That's when you see like companies take over other companies. So we see the social norm being okay when you're older, but not when you're younger.